Number 1.
2, 3,
4.
5.
Alrighty. So, you may remember seeing famous pieces of artwork such as the Statue of David or the Last Supper at some point in your lifetime, whether that be through the media or museums or anything along those lines. You may also wonder, why does some older artwork seem to have a perfect, seamless style, while some looks very unproportionate and over-exaggerated? And for the most part, you might just think it's simply the artist's style. However, these specific features are not actually a style that pertains to the artist, but rather trends that were followed during different periods of time amongst masses of people. These trends, much like fashion or memes on social media, come in spurts and then they slowly die off. With this in mind, I'll be discussing how easy it is to identify the first 3 periods in the artistic timeline that you'll see here. And as you may know a bit about me, I've done multiple classes in artisticness and design, and I usually take the trends of the present to be able to create products for me and for others. However, this term, I've had the pleasure of taking my art appreciation course at Nicolet, where instead I got to learn the trends of the past, which is why I will be going ahead and presenting what I've learned in regards to them today. So, the first topic I'm going to talk about will be the Greek classical era, followed by the medieval period, and then the Renaissance. So first, we're going to go ahead and start with the Greek classical era. So this era has a value of traits that make it quite iconic. So one of these traits is going to be the concept of idealism. Idealism is basically what is the ideal image during the time. So to put it simply, the trend at this time was bodily perfection. So the reason being is at this time, the Greeks were very sporty, agile type people. And during this time, the Greek Olympics were born. And so the idealistic image at this time was to be very muscular and fit. According to National Geographic, the collection of events during the Greek Olympic Games were wrestling, boxing, long jump, javelin, discus, and even chariot racing. An example of this idealistic style can first be seen with the sculpture that's known as the Discobolus of Myron, which it not only shows off the perfection within his muscles and definition, but also the perfection in his athletic form as he goes to throw his discus, like the Olympic sport. And classical Greek art is not only known for muscular perfection, but it's also known for its perfection in areas such as wrinkles in clothing. They all follow a sort of smooth flow and pattern, following that idealistic image again, like the Aphrodite of Cnidos sculpture. And all right, now that we've addressed some of the main features of the classical period, we're going to go on and see how the medieval period was quite the opposite. So the medieval era has its own characteristics, like I said, that are the opposite. So first, we're going to talk about how this era and its features can be very exaggerated. So as you can see here, the St. Francis altarpiece exhibits just that. So artists like Bonaventura used these unproportionate features to create a certain vibe from their pieces. The long, tall figure gives a looming appearance of godliness or power. The long hands, facial features, and overall lanky appearance also allow the body to take up any sort of empty space within the piece. This altarpiece is going to be a prime example for what medieval art expresses, and I'll have it side by side with some other slides of examples for what the medieval artwork possesses. So with that, another trait of medieval artwork is that it is very influenced on religion. So you'll see a primarily Christian influence during this time period, as you can see with this work by Giotto. This piece translates directly to the Mourning of Christ, where you will see religious connotations such as Jesus himself and angels. And once again, with the altarpiece, we'll see a religious kind of connotation as he's holding a type of Bible in his hand. And now, lastly, in these next set of examples here, we're going to see yet another trend during the medieval time period. This one is going to be like the Apocalypse tapestry and the altarpiece, they follow a sort of storyboarding technique to what you'd see in today's modern comic books. So each sort of block is going to represent a different story or part to a story with different religious tales. You'll see a lot of this in a lot of your famous chapels that have a very similar sort of features as well. These type of pieces are also going to use very striking color palettes, where you'll see how these both use a red or an orange and a blue color, which are opposite to the color wheel, that help make the stories stand out that much more. And now, just like the classical and medieval periods, the Renaissance has its own exclusive styles that make it stand out amongst the rest. So first, we're going to start off with the most famous artist in the entire world. While I did bring up the Last Supper at the start of this presentation, we all know this painting on the right here much better. The Mona Lisa by Leonardo has been dubbed the most famous painting ever made, with over 10 million people going to view specifically that painting in the Louvre every year. And speaking of Leonardo, according to Ludwig Heinrich Heidenreich, the director of the Central Institute for History and Art and the author of one of Leonardo da Vinci's biographies, he states that Leonardo's lifespan would have actually only amounted to 33% of the actual Renaissance. With that, it is astonishing how a lifespan of 67 years doing a 200-year time span would create an entire legacy for centuries to come. So, let's take a look at both Leonardo and others' works during the Renaissance and see what make it so desirable. So first, we're going to go ahead and talk about the first feature of the Renaissance, is that they have very muted, calming color palettes, rather they're darker or lighter in tone. So here, we'll see how Leonardo uses this to his advantage, as he has very brighter colored forms with the Last Supper, with Jesus and his disciples, and a muted color in the backdrop. This helps highlight and bring attention to what's going on in the front. And then with the Mona Lisa, he brightens up the face and makes that more of a viewing piece, whereas the hair and the clothes are very dark because that's not where he wants your eyes to look when you're viewing the piece. Alrighty. And not only was there color palettes during this time, but we also see religion once again resurfacing. So once more with the Last Supper, we see Christianity very up and popular, but we also see the classical Greek era re-arise as we see Greek and Roman religions coming back into play. So we can see this in the Birth of Venus by Botticelli, where it shows the religious figures, but also a new art trend that's going to arise. So opposite of the Greek classical period's idealism, we earn a new form that's known as naturalism. So instead of the body forms that are ideal, we're taking a look at what's more natural. We'll see this in the more curved and irregular shapes in the Birth of Venus, and also more natural face shapes in the Mona Lisa. Now, on top of color palettes, religious figures, and naturalism, Leonardo's The Last Supper shows the impact perspective can have on a piece. The long room and the masses of people in the front really emphasize what's going on up here and give depth to the piece. And now if we look at the School of Athens by Raphael, we see how he takes the architecture on steroids and shows how depth of a piece and very natural behaviors can really bring impact to some artwork. And, you know, it allows the eyes to wander, and it almost looks like you're at a zoo watching an exhibit where every little piece is different and there's actually natural behaviors going on. Overall, the Renaissance creates a combination of classical and medieval works in a sense. Both the palettes, perspective, naturalism, idealism, and more. They create a pathway to the future of the Baroque, Rococo, Impressionism, and contemporary styles. So, in conclusion, I've told you about the classical era and the iconic style of idealism with their seamless, smooth lines and muscular perfection, the medieval period and its emphasis on storyboarding, religious portrayal, and exaggerated features, and lastly, the Renaissance with its smooth palettes, religious connotations, perspectives, and naturalism. All these paintings, while individualized in many ways, can perfectly showcase the impact trends can have on a hobby or culture. In this case, we can see how millions of artists and commonalities between their pieces can create a staple in the art industry for hundreds of years at a time. Nowadays, we may see a meme trend for a month or a fashion trend for less than a decade, but art is still glorified for centuries. All I can say is good luck finding the Spag balloon meme or Air Force One tennis shoes in a museum. And I hope you'll at least take some of this knowledge away on some of the best trendsetters in the world, the artists. We survived. All done.